as you can tell by these last, I don't know, well, actually, the first 8 seconds of this video, I'm speechless. That's the reaction of, I think, a lot of fans in F1 a couple of weeks ago, CJ. Speechless. There was an actual winner other than Max Verstappen. Yeah, yay. Good
Absolutely.
for Lando Norris too. That was, if anybody was going to win, it was good that he was the one that got the win.
Yeah, he's been knocking on the door for quite a long time. It was a good thing for McLaren, good thing for Lando Norris, good thing for the sport. It was, everything everybody has been asking for so long was for Max Verstappen to be beaten on the track by somebody. There were some things that contributed to it in that race. So don't get too excited. Don't think that Lando Norris is necessarily going to take it to or anything like that. But that does go to show that McLaren, in particular, their package of upgrades work, and that Red Bull is not completely bulletproof now.
All right. Well, we are going to not only talk about Lando's win, but we have a few other big topics that we're going to talk about here on our show. Please subscribe to our new motorsports channel here at Mystery Caution. And of course, there's not going to be, well, we'll have a little bit of NASCAR this week. We are going to post a video, just a little bit on what's going on with the All Star race. But this is for one of the few times during the season here on this channel, this is really about F1. So, perfect week to take advantage of it following the huge ratings bonanza for the sport in Miami. And we'll see how it translates to Italy coming up later this week. Okay, so Norris joined F1 back in 2019, and he was somebody that was, I guess, getting the reputation for, one of those kind of runner-up deals, basically. Bridesmaids, whatever you want to call them. And if you look at it, it was, I guess, what two they actually can chronologize. They were able to chronologically go over how long it had been since he stood on the podium's top step and got a win, and that was 2,220 days. So the win was, of course, in Formula 2, not Formula 1, but a big win. And as you said, though, that nobody's got any false assumptions that this is going to mean anything. So what then is the most important reason why this was good for the sport?
It was great for the sport. And again, what you want to see is competitiveness. We've known from the beginning of the season that Red Bull has the car to beat. They got out of the gate faster than anyone before, or any of their competition. And it's now several years in a row that they've been dominating, especially with Max Verstappen. There have been a couple times in the past where Norris has come close. He's had a total of 16 podiums throughout his career. He ended up having 7 last year. There were times where he was able to get in front of Verstappen at the start, or maybe on a restart, to be able to lead some laps. But over time, over a race distance, over a fuel run, that Red Bull just handles better. It's nicer on its tires. It's easier to drive, so therefore Max can get more out of it, and Norris and the rest of the field, quite honestly, just can't match that. What happened in Miami was a confluence of events. Norris had an absolutely fantastic drive to get started. He started fifth, so it's not like he started on the front row. It wasn't like in the past where he was able to beat Max Verstappen off the line. So he actually had to work his way forward a couple of positions. There was pit strategy that played in. McLaren made the right calls at the right times on the pits. There was a caution that ironically led to his victory, caused by Max Verstappen, and that was twofold in retrospect. Number one, Verstappen brought out the caution that solidified the fact that Norris could get the lead with basically a free pit stop, and that's obviously the one thing that everybody's aiming for whenever you get a safety car period in Formula One. That happened to fall in Lando Norris's favor. And then secondly, come to find out after the race that the way that Max Verstappen hit the track side curb and that little post, that bollard as they call it, that ended up being the debris that caused the safety car because somebody had to go out and get it. The metal piece in the ground that thing is set in, Verstappen drove directly over it. And after the race, we learned that there was damage to the bottom of his floor. So it was already not a great track. And Max had been complaining about his car all weekend, I think after qualifying, or maybe it was after he won the sprint race on Saturday. And they called back and said, "Hey, congratulations, great performance." He said, "Not bad for having a crappy car," basically was his response back. And when you have a crappy car and you're that close to the edge, and then you make a mistake and you have damage to the bottom of your floor, which is the most important thing to keep that car moving fast and working the way that it does, then you've got some serious problems. And that doesn't discredit anything that McLaren did. It doesn't discredit anything that Lando Norris did. It's the reality of the situation that racing is a game of fine margins. McLaren brought a whole host of upgrades, and those upgrades worked perfectly. They called the perfect strategy. Lando did great driving, made absolutely no mistakes. Max Verstappen did, and therefore you've got a Lando Norris win. Are those mistakes going to happen? Is that confluence of events going to happen, this weekend in Imola? Likely not, but maybe if we look at the odds and we look at Max Verstappen for the next couple of weeks, maybe you'll get a little bit more, or maybe a little bit less negative, I guess, maybe when you try to go for him this year. So don't bank on it for the future. But McLaren definitely took a step forward, and Red Bull Verstappen made a mistake, and that opened the door, and McLaren and Lando Norris charged through it.
And that's really the only way that you're going to be able most of the time to win these races is you have to hope for a mistake and then be able to take advantage of it. That's about it. It's the way it is. In some other sports, you could say the same thing. But for the most part, with the dominance, of course, of Max Verstappen, and of course the way the sport is normally, this is not something new. This is how it gets done. So, what about the ratings? We talked about that last week. Everybody knows the ratings were really good. Now, whether or not it was helped by the fact that NASCAR was on a rain delay, nobody knows. There's no doubt that the ratings would have been high anyway, and maybe had nothing to do with the fact that the ratings were high. But it didn't hurt, that's for sure. But now comes the big test, doesn't it? How are the ratings after this next race?
Yeah, exactly right. It was you could not have timed anything better. The second or the minute that Formula One coverage ended, NASCAR was rolling out onto the track and getting ready to start. It was like they planned it.
It's unfortunate, but it should be like that. You would hope it would be like that with both IndyCar and F1 every week. And I know that they don't care about each other, but in a way they should. There should be some sort of a working relationship because it helps everybody. Now, I know Formula One usually Eastern time, it doesn't matter anyway, but IndyCar, we've talked about that too, but that's a little bit more on an IndyCar sense. I think that's something that just is a no-brainer, that for whatever reason they just don't communicate or just don't care.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because if you're a racing fan, you are a true racing fan, and you're likely to watch all of the racing that is out there. Nonetheless, they have it set in their minds and their schedules that they need to compete against one another, and they force people to choose. And I think to your point, if people didn't have to choose, I bet you everybody would watch more of both or all three. It's really interesting that you say that as well, because this week we've got finally a person in the name of Kyle Larson, or not this week, but this coming month, where we've got the Kyle Larson attempting to do both the Indy 500 and the Coke 600. So that used to not be possible because of the competition between the two series. Way back in time, you'd have John Andretti, you'd have Tony Stewart, you'd have several guys, Kurt Busch, that would do that. But IndyCar and NASCAR kind of changed their schedules to make it impossible. So a driver could not physically actually do it unless they had a teleportation machine. And there was a lot of outcry and there was pushback, and it took a number of years, but they finally put the times back to their traditional spots so that this could be done. And look at the bonus that you get. There's a lot of attention on Kyle Larson going to Indianapolis and trying to do the double for the first time since I think it was Kurt Busch was the last one that tried it, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a couple of years. That's always exciting to watch. It's interesting. You draw more people to it. But like you said, it's going to be interesting to see these ratings here at Imola, a completely different track, not in the United States. Is there as much attention from the United States on this race? And it's going to be a normal time, so it'll be early in the morning, so it's not going to directly conflict with anything. But it will be interesting to see how much of a boost, if you've got a McLaren and Lando Norris having won the race prior, how much Imola bumps up in the ratings. We'll see.
Yeah, it said ESPN reported that an average of 3.1 million viewers tuned in for the race, with a peak of 3.6 million. The previous record average viewership was 2.6 million and peaked at 2.9, which was set during the inaugural Miami GP in 2022. The television ratings then dipped for last year's race, coming in at 1.96. But again, we'll see what happens this go around and find out whether or not they're going to get a jump in ratings. With the time, Eastern, for the race?
It'll probably be around 7:30 in the morning. I don't know exactly off the top of my head when it starts. The European rounds are typically 7:30 in the morning.
And look, we know it's not going to be anywhere near as high as this because of the fact that it's in the morning. And it's not in the U.S. Not that it would. I mean, if it was Italy at 12 o'clock Eastern, that would be interesting. But that's just not going to happen. So, and let's keep in mind too that the viewership is nearly double than what it was in 2018. But last year, they said it really bottomed out a little bit. I think it was about 9% compared to 2022. So, are you surprised that? I mean, is there a reason? Well, of course, they're going to single out, which they should, the no parity. And that's then probably the main reason why 2023 was nowhere near as good ratings-wise as 2022. Is that it? Is that the only reason?
No, that's not it. I mean, the first one obviously was the inaugural Miami Grand Prix, so everybody's going to want to see a new race. Same thing from Las Vegas. There was a lot of concern, actually, given the fact that Las Vegas was what it was last year, that there was going to be a dip for Miami this year as a result of Las Vegas. They thought could potentially be a hangover as a result of that. But so I think the rain played into it, NASCAR being on rain delay. I think Miami's been, even though it dipped in year 2 of the 3 years now, Miami's still been one of the more followed races. I know from tracking on things that I've written and things that have been written about the Miami Grand Prix, they generally tend to get higher traffic. So for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the location. It's a nice, hot, warm, sexy location. Does that to it? I'm sure that it does. The rain delay, as I said, certainly happened, but I would anticipate parity is something to do with it. I mean, the true test of that's going to be the comparison between Miami and Imola, though. And I don't mean direct head to head, like, Miami's numbers specifically last week or 2 weeks ago versus Imola's specific numbers this week, but more so the percentage in changes from the last race at that track to the new one. So given the last time that we raced at Imola, which unfortunately happened to be 2022 because this race was flooded out in 2023, was there a drastic difference in the viewership of this race comparatively versus last year of Miami to this year of Miami? I think that's a more accurate comparison as to how much the parity really drives the viewership.
And Imola, so it should have come right after Miami last year, 2 weeks after. Absolutely. Whatever. Okay.
Yep.
And it did in 2022.
Yep.
All right. So and look, 2022 they had higher ratings, so we'll see. It would be nice to see what those ratings do become. Maybe it would have been an advantage to have lower ratings because a bigger increase. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. And but look, the bottom line was that the ratings dipped almost 10 million average overall, not just during the Miami race, but the entire season. So no question that again parity is the big deal here in the U.S. when it comes to viewership. And so basically, you think they had a spike because of like the Netflix series was popular, and
For
people
sure.
started to watch, and then all of a sudden they did start to watch, and then they're saying to themselves, "Is this the Max Verstappen series? What are we doing here?" And then the ratings
You're
dropped last year, so now this is a big year.
Yeah,
So
you were exactly right. I know several people who actually started Formula One, that I started watching Formula One as a result of the next Netflix series. They were not Formula One watchers prior to that, but for whatever reason, they watched the Netflix series, and now they started watching the series. I think most people I know that are Formula One fans don't watch the Netflix series. So just interesting that. But you brought up another good point. Another way to really measure how parity is impacting the viewership is really to look at the first race of the season versus the average for the remaining races of the year.
okay.
So if Max Verstappen, which he has the past few seasons, comes out and completely, or maybe to make it more fair, maybe make it the first 2 or 3 races of a given season, look at the average of those versus the average of all the remaining rest of the season viewership, just to see. Because if you see Max Verstappen dominate and lead every single lap for the first 3 races of a season, you're probably going to be less likely to tune into the remaining 19 for the rest of the year.
All right. What I did, one more thing, and then we'll move on, that I did not like was after winning the race, Norris was asked about Donald Trump's presence.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I guess an honor, but also said Donald is someone that you got to have a lot of respect for in many ways. Now, these comments, big surprise, created some controversy, if you want to say, from F1 fans who didn't really, and again, it's not a surprise because if you think that there are fans, or not fans, but if you think there are people here in this country that either like or don't like them, just imagine outside this country. I got to imagine there's a lot of people that have probably no idea on Earth. Well, first of all, they have no idea on Earth how the hell Grandpa's the president, but they're probably wondered 4 years ago, how is this guy president? So, and we don't know what is said, but I get it. But what I didn't like was it seemed like he did backtrack because he said you got to be thankful for anyone who acknowledges your hard work. And in other words, it just seemed like, once he heard about the fans not being, because, if you don't even have to, because what he said was nothing. I guess what he didn't do is say something negative. Like after the question was posed, he didn't say, well, I don't give a shit what he says or what he thinks or why he's here. That's the only thing that would make, those people on that side of the fence feel satisfied with your answer. So you can't satisfy them. I just wish that some of these athletes would have a bigger backbone. That's all. Just be like, look.
The next day when I saw, there was a headline, I forget where it was, where I saw it, but it was McLaren defends itself from Donald Trump visiting the garage. Like, on what on what planet should any sports team have to apologize for a former president, a former senator, a former mayor, a former governor, whatever, for visiting? I mean, for crying out loud, it's ridiculous. And Lando Norris actually said he's my lucky charm. He came in and his visit helped me.
That's even worse.
God forbid. Like, I mean, who cares? Like, sports is meant to be a distraction. The problem, it's not a problem with sports. It's a problem with society right now. Sports are a diversion. Entertainment has traditionally been a diversion, a place to go to escape. all the crap that you have to hear about and read about, and it is shoved down everybody's face and down their throats so often, every single day. I don't feel that. And when I read the article, because honestly, I was looking to see where exactly McLaren quote unquote defended itself or quote unquote apologized. No, they didn't. They just said Donald Trump asked to come and visit, and we enabled him to come down to see the garage. Like,
Oh,
so who's at fault,
yeah, right.
McLaren or the person writing the article trying to stir crap up? Um, it's no athlete or sports team should, regardless of the president, how many champion. It's a tradition for a champion to go and visit the White House, is it not?
Yeah.
Since when did that become controversial?
And this is F1 trying to gain, some sort of a foothold in the United States. And if they think that they're going to be doing it by picking one side of the political fence, they have a hard enough time getting fans at all, let alone going, well, let's pick and choose who our fans are going to be in the United States. So
Exactly right.
just silly. Okay, so that was Miami, and now we're heading to Italy. Let's, before we talk about Italy, go over a couple of news stories, and one that I gotta know about this because this is really interesting. The more you talk about it, and actually, where's it going to be? Yeah, here's some of it, and we're going to talk about Magnussen and these really crazy penalties. So this is from The Athletic. And was this an article that was, by the way, I hope this was a free article, was it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. If you have told Haas going into the Formula One season after Miami would have points from 4 rounds and sit 7th in the championship, the team would have been delighted. A car that is more forgiving on its tires, combined with some particularly impressive displays from Nico Hulkenberg, has put Haas a step ahead of Williams, Sauber, and Alpine so far. It has surpassed all preseason expectations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On a couple of occasions, the deciding factor to make the top 10 has been Hulkenberg's teammate Kevin Magnussen, whose bold defensive tactics, it wouldn't be a stretch to call them aggressive, have helped his teammate snare a couple of extra points. But after a penalty-laden weekend in Miami, Magnussen will spend the rest of the season on the brink of an F1 race ban for his driving behavior, assuming he doesn't trigger it with one more offense. At the time when the gulf between F1's fastest 5 teams, okay, we'll go through that. Magnussen had this in mind in Saudi Arabia. Let's talk about. Actually, you know what? Let's start at this point. Let's take a look at where do we have the? I think it's down here. Yeah, let's take a look at the offenses. Holy mackerel! So what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is just this season, right?
Yeah.
And this is not normal, is it?
It is for the points that are currently on his license, and I believe, strictly speaking to the rule book, that a point that is put on your license, is similar to a driver's license. If you get a speeding ticket or whatever, you cause an accident, you get points awarded to your license, and if you've got to go a certain amount of time before those points expire, and if you exceed a certain number of points, then you end up with penalties associated with them. Formula One racing licenses apply the same way. So the points on his license have now added up to the point where now, if he has another incident where he is adjudicated to have been in the wrong and it's a points offense and he gets more points on his license, he's going to face a ban. It started pretty quietly because there was one race. The first time I really remember it being public was when he held up, and I think it was Saudi Arabia, he held up the cars behind him to enable Hulkenberg to get enough of a gap and enough of a lead to be able to pit and get out and retain his position. There is nothing wrong with that. Teams do that all the time in all kinds of racing, whatever they can do. Watch the playoffs in Cup. People will, try to hold up the competitor that's chasing their teammate for the win, right? That's exactly what Magnussen was doing. The problem is that he, on several occasions, actually created contact. So since he had crashes and contact with other cars with his defensive driving, you end up with these issues. And then, boy, did it really come to a head in Miami. Like after the sprint race, He basically said, I don't care. It is what it is. I'm going to do what I have to do to help my teammates. And then in a race, he racked up three 10-second penalties, 30 seconds on track, where he knew that he was going to finish last. So at that point, I'm going to do whatever I can do. And that involved cutting chicanes, that involved going off course to stay in front of like Lewis Hamilton and others. He just threw all hell to the wind to do everything he could possibly think of, to say, it is what it is. I'm finishing last anyway, so I'm going to throw it all in here and help my teammate. And then once that happened, because it was so egregious in those, that's when obviously the points then totaled up on his license and got him to the brink. But that's when everybody started to go back and look at all these other offenses for him too. So, Haas has been good. I think I had questions about them on the preseason because I don't recall them showing a whole heck of a lot of speed when they were doing the initial testing, but they've come out swinging in the races, and they've not been they've not been slow. They've been at the top of the mid-pack battle, which is great for them. And remember last season, they had a terrible season, and Gunther Steiner was fired just before this season started. And he was the Christian Horner. He's the team lead for Haas. And now off track, you got Magnussen's incidents on track that we just talked about. And now you've got off track stuff with Steiner suing Haas, and Haas suing Steiner back. So all of the news this week tends to be about Haas, whether it's on track or off track. Just a lot going on within that organization right now.
All right. It looks like, so he actually had 4 incidents in the sprint race.
Yes.
That was Saturday?
That was Saturday. And that's when he said, you know what, I'm already screwed. So I'm going to do whatever I've got on Sunday, whatever in my power. I don't care. I'm going to help out my team.
Well, hey, it's refreshing to hear someone just admit it.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in NASCAR. So
it doesn't happen in Formula One ever. So, yeah.
Let's see. Actually, no, we don't want that. Let's go. Actually, I have it down here. Let's get what his. These were his comments. Let me put it up here. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The race kind of unfolded.
Yeah, they were fair. All the penalties were fair, but I had to do my thing to protect Nico, make the space. Same story as Jeddah. So I got some penalties. We got some points as a team. Kind of sucks for me, but because I think we could have probably just finished there. Both cars have we played the game together, kept me in the DRS, but Nico cut the chicane at one point and broke the DRS, and then I was vulnerable to Lewis. Started fighting with him, lost ground to Nico, and that was it. So I had to play the supporting game, not to have him be overtaken as well. So not the way I want to go racing, but what I had to do.
What he had to do.
Good. It's about time.
Yeah.
Honesty. It's a rare thing.
Yeah, and so let's see. McLaren's boss, Andrea Stella, unimpressed by Magnussen's actions in the sprint. Unacceptable. And the penalties should be exponential, not cumulative. 5 plus, 5 plus, 5 should equal. Maybe you need to spend a weekend at home with your family, reflect on your sportsmanship, and then come back. Okay, so really, what you're saying though is this happens, but not to this extent. Like this has gone like overboard.
Yeah, it's always been a part of racing, and it's always been a part of Formula One. I mean, that's why you have 2 drivers on a team to, number one, to split your chances, but number 2, like that's why there's a designated number 1 driver within the team, because if you're going to split resources, if you're going to be in a situation where somebody has to make a sacrifice to be able to do the net good for the team, you've got to have a clear hierarchy of a number 1 driver and a number 2 driver. And we've been saying it forever. The most important thing of a Formula One season is not the driver's title. That is completely secondary. The biggest thing, the most monetarily important thing that there is in Formula One is the constructors title. So it is all about the team maximizing its points. It doesn't care what driver it comes from. They don't care about the drivers' championship. They only care about the constructors' championship and where they match up against, where Haas matches up against Ferrari, against Aston Martin, McLaren, etc. That's what really matters to them. And that's why you have number 1 and 2 drivers. And anybody who thinks that this hasn't been happening, whether subtly or overtly, for as long as Formula One has been around, you are sadly deluding yourself.
That's why those comments, I mean, look, he's playing the I'm going to be honest game with his comments. So, play the honest game. Don't be being offended that this doesn't happen kind of reaction. Like, I can't believe this is going on. That's not good. Because
it goes back to Austria, I think, when Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello were teammates at Ferrari. Rubens Barrichello led all the way up until the checkered flag, and then coming off the last turn, he held up and let Schumacher pass for the win because Schumacher was in the lead for points.
Oh, my Lord.
Schumacher had a chance to win the driver's title.
That would never work in the United States of America. Never.
Already assured, Barrichello, doing his job as a teammate to help his teammate, pulled aside and let Schumacher. And there was a big righteous outrage. As
I can imagine.
This is the exact same thing. Get over it. It's always been around. It's always been there.
That's nuts. Wow. Okay. So, and then you mentioned the situation with Steiner and Haas. So Gunther Steiner is being sued by Haas in what appears to be a tit-for-tat response after the former team principal launched his own legal action. Recently emerged that Steiner has taken legal action against his former team, claiming unpaid commissions, as well as the use of his likeness in promotional materials and merchandise. That whole thing again. I think we've heard enough of that in college athletics. Steiner has alleged that Haas violated its employment agreement. Less than 2 weeks later, papers have been filed, and there you go. Yeah. So, really, is that all this is about? That he believes that he hasn't been fairly compensated commission-wise?
I think he's ticked off that he got fired just before the season started. In our preview show, I mentioned how shocking it was. I mean, we talked about the Netflix series. Who was the one that really came out of that Netflix series, the star? It was Gunther Steiner. And he had done a ton for Haas. He had gotten them the season before, not last season, but the season before, one of their best seasons yet. And then they took a step backward in 2023. And Haas, pretty ruthless, fired him, and I think he just felt aggrieved and was looking to get back. Steiner is now doing commentary. He wrote a book, and according to the Haas lawsuit, in that book there were some pictures published that Haas technically owned and didn't quote unquote license. So again, that whole likeness thing and who owns the picture that is going to be a part of a book that's sold for profit, etc. That's what they're countersuing for. So it is just it's an off-track distraction. They're both ticked at each other. Steiner's ticked that he got fired, probably thinking he got fired unfairly and unjustly, and so he's going to go after them as an individual. And then Haas is not one to sit there and take it. So totally tit for tat. But it's just interesting that you've got the on track with Kevin Magnussen and his penalties that you've got to deal with, and then at the same time you've got to deal with the legal trouble and all the PR and all the press releases and all the work on the communications teams that have to go toward that, and all the attention, quite honestly. So we talk about attention and the focus on the track and how off track troubles and worries and problems and stress and life issues affect on track performance, and that's in every single sport. Same is going to be true here for Haas. So I just hope they can keep it together and hope they can keep being at the front end of that mid-pack battle for the rest of the season. We'll see how it goes.
All right, so here we're taking a look at the Autodromo, also known as the Autodrome. This is in Italy. At least
did you see the name of this week's race by chance?
Yeah. Well, is it something Romagna 2024?
It it is Formula One, MSC Cruises, Gran Premio del
Oh,
Made
this
in
whole thing right here?
Emilia Romagna 2024. That is your race title, ladies and gentlemen. Rolls right off the tongue, fits on a t-shirt. Put that on everything that you got. I have never seen a race name like that. What is going through their heads? That might be the most interesting thing of this weekend's race.
I mean, they act like they have so much money they can't be bothered by some of these other things going on, like making money from sponsorship logos, things that we don't take for granted here with races. I mean, that's huge as far as getting your name on a logo and how it's marketed properly and everything that goes out in print, video, everything. And it's like they couldn't care less. I don't get it. I don't understand the thinking process of that. Again, the logos, the race logos, they don't have any. They just don't care. And then, like you said, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I thought it was just here. I thought it was just, well, it's got to be Della Emilia Romagna 2024. No, it's the whole thing.
That is the race name. That is what we will be racing under this Sunday.
All right. Well, that's the broadcasters. They'll have fun with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the track, and this is all about the track. Okay. So what is the deal? What kind of track is this?
So this is a natural terrain road course. It's one of the old ones. So this is what Formula One used to race on all the way back from 1980 when they had their first race. There have been some changes to it. This is a track where Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna, unfortunately, were killed in 1994. But long story short, this has elevation changes. It's an old school narrow track. It's going to be difficult to pass. It's going to be a strategy type of race. And it's going to be so important to qualify up front and get that start off of the line. So again, those of you who thought that, McLaren and Lando Norris maybe had something for the rest of the season, they're going to have to put it on the line Saturday in qualifying in order to put themselves in position to get that shot off the line. Otherwise, you're going to see Max Verstappen stretch out quite a lead here.
All right. Well, you see, the draft kings have said, no, none of that. It's Emilia Romagna, GP 2024. So, look, Max is down from 600 or 700 minus to minus 500. So it's dropping.
Quite the bargain there. Yeah, and you're probably going to want it. So Lando Norris, clearly, he's won. I would look at his odds maybe from a podium standpoint. Sergio Perez on this one is looking really good at plus 1,400 because, again, if Max Verstappen has, a fault in qualifying, ends up starting in the back, it's going to be really hard to move his way forward. He's going to have to do it through pit strategy. And the next best car on the grid is another Red Bull, which is driven by Sergio Perez. So I think that he's a bargain if you're looking for him. Obviously,
that's just a podium.
Correct. From a podium perspective, if you missed for whatever reason on Lando Norris last week and you want to continue that trend of taking somebody every week other than Max Verstappen just to hit one, Perez is probably your guy. From a podium perspective, look at Lando Norris, negative 225 there. People really banking on him to be able to get there. So I think what you're seeing here on the podium spots, it from a value perspective, is certainly Carlos Sainz. He didn't go anywhere. Ferrari didn't slow down. So I think Carlos Sainz, he's still getting the upper hand on Charles Leclerc. I think Leclerc was a little bit further ahead maybe in Miami, but I still think Carlos Sainz has been the driver that has had the most momentum in Ferrari this season. He's on a contract year. He knows he's not going to be back with Ferrari, so he's auditioning. So from a podium odds perspective, that plus 275 for Carlos Sainz is looking really good. The other two that I might consider here from a podium standpoint are Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. We know Mercedes has been struggling with their car. They've been saying that it's inconsistent throughout the weekend. They have said that they found the direction that they need to go. They brought the first set of upgrades or first half of upgrades, I should say, to Miami. They've got the second half coming into Imola. So we're going to see this weekend what the full package of upgrades for that Mercedes brings. And that may move Hamilton and Russell further up the order, and maybe we get a better fight for podium right there. So if you're looking at bargains this week, Carlos Sainz for a podium. If you want to go for a long shot for a podium, banking on those Mercedes upgrades to come through, probably a Lewis Hamilton.
And what about a race winner without Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston Martin? Hey, there's Kevin Magnussen.
Why wouldn't you look at Nico Hulkenberg if you've got Kevin Magnussen on your side?
Right?
Yeah, I don't put, RB, Yuki, and Daniel there at the top. They outperformed in Miami, which was great for them. I'm not convinced that that's going to stick. Everybody's a broken clock is right twice a day. They've been so bad all season. I find it hard to believe that Miami is going to be sustainable for them. So I genuinely would recommend a Nico Hulkenberg. I would wait a little bit, certainly if you're only getting 250 or whatever on Yuki. I think Nico Hulkenberg here is probably your better route to go. Magnussen's not going to be as aggressive because we talked about before, if he puts a foot wrong, he's going to be suspended. So he's still going to do what he can. But Nico Hulkenberg and that Haas has been moving up that mid-pack order. I think Nico Hulkenberg is your guy here.
All right. And let's see. As far as the team props are concerned, this is just basically winning racing. It's the same thing.
You got it.
So, yeah. What do you see a difference at all? Like what would be the if there was a glaring difference between the team and the drivers' lines? Is there something that you could take advantage of at all? Like,
Yeah. If you've got so if, like we talked about with the drivers 1 and 2, maybe they're a little bit more even and you don't have a clear-cut number 1, number 2 driver. Haas, obviously, now at this point, we know that Nico's the number 1 driver at this point because Kevin has sacrificed himself. But if there's not a clear, like Ferrari at the beginning of the season, that the Ferrari might be able to be competitive and they're probably next in line if Red Bull's going to lose or have a problem. But you can't choose between the driver, go with Ferrari. Take the team. That way you get both drivers, the 2 versus just having to choose 1. So if you split your odds and you just go bank on 1 driver, you're kind of flipping a coin there. And if you have a 50-50 chance of them not making it, whereas if you take the team, it's really more, I see it more as when you can't decide between the driver. But if there's a clear-cut number 1 driver, number 2 driver, you're probably better off taking the number 1 driver, generally speaking.
And why wouldn't this be the case regarding the fastest lap, that Max wouldn't have the fastest lap almost every race? That seems a little unusual to me. I mean, he's only minus 215.
Yeah, there have been, and it's not a given that Max is going to get the fastest lap on any given week. There are very much teams that play the strategy. If you have the opportunity to come in and get fresh tires for your last lap, teams have done that and gone out and turned a qualifying lap on the last lap of the race to catch that point because it's worth a point. So you get
really?
Yeah, and points are extremely valuable, and it all goes back to that constructors. End of the year, the more points that a team can earn, they all add up, and 1 point could be the difference between a position at the end of the year in the championship, and that can mean millions of dollars in this sport.
Okay, and so what have you noticed then there? Have you noticed anybody? Again, I'm assuming Max still is the one that more often than not has got the fastest, but is there another driver that just happens to be good at this?
Lando Norris and Sergio Perez tend to, if Max doesn't get it, they generally speaking are in contention to get it. And with McLaren, with their upgrades and how fast they are, if there's a finish that they don't stand any chance of gaining if they stay on track, but they also don't stand any chance of losing if they pit. I wouldn't put it past Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, those 3 to dip in, grab some tires, and go out and get that point, because they are in a very tight battle in that midfield. Perez obviously is going to be more for himself in terms of the Drivers' Championship, but if you're looking for the true values there, that Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri from a McLaren standpoint, they might be willing to gamble to try to get that extra point and move up that finishing order in the championship.
Okay, yeah, because it looks to me like, let's see, where are we? We're still over. Okay, here it is. So, yeah, I mean, it looks to me that the odds are pretty good for that. Like, why wouldn't you just wager then on the fastest lap? That seems to be a better wager in this sport.
It is if you can correctly predict it. It's not as easy to predict as the winner, because that situation where somebody might dip in for fresh tires on the last lap.
It could be anybody.
It could be anybody, and it depends on the circumstances of how the race plays out at that point. Max Verstappen might even do it if he's got a 30-second lead. If he can get in and get out, and he can get the extra point and pad his cushion, he's going to do it too. So that I think personally, it's more difficult to predict who's going to get the fastest lap versus the race win or the podium.
Yeah, we should we should look into that. Find out who's had the fastest laps this year.
We can do that. Absolutely.
And see if that is something that's worth it. Okay, so what's next?
Up next on the schedule is going to be Monaco, the wonderful weekend of racing that is Memorial Day weekend. Start off with Monaco, head over to Indianapolis for the 500, and then the day in Charlotte for the 600. Favorite weekend of every year.
And then that is we'll be able to talk about what, next week or the week after?
Week after.
Okay. So next week, it's back to all NASCAR. Wait, next week is when we preview the race. So we preview the race next week. We'll be talking about not just the NASCAR Coke 600, but we'll also talk about the F1 race here on the channel, and we'll give our 2 cents on the Indy 500. So
yeah, I miscounted. Yeah, you're exactly right. So next week is the preview. My bad.
Yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about next week. Again, look out for the video we're going to put together, and that's going to be just a short one on a NASCAR All-Star race this weekend. So check that out. So, and then next week, we'll be back on the air talking majority of NASCAR, because that is a big race, the Coke 600. Blaney won that last year, right?
Yes, he did.
I believe he did, yes. So looking forward to that. That's actually a good track now with the next gen, so that should be fun. And the whole day, as you said, should be fun. So we'll have a lot to talk about next week here on Mystery Caution. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and let us know what's on your mind. If you have anything that you would like us to talk about, anything that you think we're wasting our time talking about, or anything at all, questions, comments, just leave them for us, and we will definitely get back to you. So also look out for CJ's link that will come up on Friday?
That is correct.
And that is going to be for RotoWire and his report on the race this weekend, which again is going to be 7:30 Eastern time on Sunday morning.
Thereabouts, yeah. It'll be early in the morning, Sunday, East Coast time. Typical European start time for the Formula One MSC Cruises Gran Premio del Maiden Italy del Emilia Romagna 2024.
Okay, that was good. Great way to end the show. Appreciate that, CJ.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll see everybody next week. Don't forget, subscribe, Mystery Caution. We'll check you out again next week with more NASCAR and F1 and IndyCar talk for the 500.